It's 2007, San Francisco. 3 roommates. Rent is due in 3 days. They have exactly $0. Most people in this situation would do one of 3 things: borrow money from parents, get a job at Starbucks, or move back home in shame. These 3 guys looked at their empty living room and said, "Let's put air mattresses on the floor and charge strangers to sleep here." This sounds like the beginning of a crime documentary. You know, the kind where the narrator says, no one suspected what would happen next. Instead, it became Airbnb, a company worth over $100 billion, operating in 220 countries, with over 7 million listings worldwide. This is the story of how 3 broke guys turned "we can't pay rent" into "we own the hospitality industry." And it's way more ridiculous than you think. Let's go back to 2007. Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia were roommates in San Francisco. They were designers, fresh out of art school, trying to make it in the big city. The problem? San Francisco is expensive, really expensive. And they were really broke. Their rent was $1,150 a month. They didn't have it. They had tried everything: freelance design work, odd jobs, asking parents for money. Nothing was working. Then, in October 2007, something interesting happened. San Francisco was hosting a big design conference. Every hotel in the city was completely booked. Sold out. No rooms available. Chesky and Gebbia had an idea. Actually, let's be honest, they had a desperate idea. They thought, what if we rent out space in our apartment to conference attendees? We have a living room. We have air mattresses. We can make breakfast. We'll call it Airbed and Breakfast. Yes, that was the actual name, not Airbnb. Not something cool and tech-sounding. Literally, come sleep on our air mattress and we'll make you eggs in the morning. The business model was basically, please help us pay rent. They bought 3 air mattresses, created a simple website, and posted it online. They charged $80 per night, which included breakfast and networking opportunities. That last part was code for, you'll be sleeping in our living room with 2 other strangers, so you might as well talk to each other. And you know what? It worked. 3 people actually showed up. 3 strangers paid $80 each to sleep on air mattresses in a random apartment in San Francisco. Chesky and Gebbia made $1,000 in one weekend, just enough to pay rent. They thought, this is genius. We've solved housing. We're going to be rich. Then the conference ended. And suddenly, no one needed air mattresses in San Francisco anymore. They were back to square one. Broke. Again. So they brought in a 3rd co-founder, Nathan Butcherchick, who was a programmer. He built a better website. They expanded the idea. Not just air mattresses, not just during conferences, but anytime, anywhere, any kind of space. They officially launched in 2008. They called it Airbed and Breakfast. They were sure it would take off. It didn't. Barely anyone used the site. They were making maybe $200 a week, total, split 3 ways. That's about $65 per person per week. You can't live on that. You can barely buy groceries on that. They needed money. They needed investors. So they started pitching to venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. The pitch went something like this. We have a website where people can rent out their spare rooms to strangers. Investors. Wait, what? Strangers sleeping in strangers' homes? Yes, that's insane. Who would do that? Well, we did it, and no, next. It got rejected by everyone. And I mean everyone. Every major venture capital firm in Silicon Valley said no. The reasons were always the same. No one will trust strangers in their home. This is a liability nightmare. The market is too small. This will never scale. They were running out of money. They were running out of time. They needed to do something drastic. So they did something completely insane. It was 2008. The US presidential election was happening: Barack Obama versus John McCain. Chesky and Jebbia had another brilliant idea. They decided to make cereal. Yes, cereal. They created two limited edition cereals, Obama O's and Cap'n McCann's. They designed the boxes themselves, bought cereal in bulk, hand-assembled 1,000 boxes, and sold them for $40 each. $40 for a box of cereal, and people bought them. Mostly as collectibles, but they bought them. The three founders made $30,000 from cereal sales. Let me repeat that. They made more money selling cereal than they did from their actual startup. When they pitched to investors again, the investors were even more confused. Wait, you're selling cereal now? I thought you were a housing company. What is this? Chesky's response: we're entrepreneurs. We do whatever it takes to survive. Most investors still said no. But one person saw something different. Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, one of the most prestigious startup accelerators in the world, looked at the cereal boxes and said, if you can convince people to pay $40 for a 5-box of cereal, you can sell anything. You're in. Y Combinator accepted Airbnb into their program. They gave them $20,000 in funding. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. Even with Y Combinator's backing, Airbnb was still struggling. They had users, but not many. The problem was obvious. The photos on the site were terrible. People were taking pictures of their apartments with their phones, bad lighting, messy rooms, terrible angles. No one wanted to book a place that looked like a crime scene. So the founders did something that, again, sounds insane. They flew to New York, rented a camera, and personally went to every listing in the city to take professional photos. Every single listing. This doesn't scale. Any business advisor would tell you, don't do things that don't scale. But they did it anyway, and it worked immediately. Bookings in New York doubled overnight, then tripled. People wanted to book places that actually looked nice. Slowly, Airbnb started to grow. They expanded to more cities. They hired photographers in each city. They improved the website. They added reviews and verification systems to build trust. By 2011, they had facilitated 1 million nights booked. By 2012, 10 million nights. By 2015, 80 million nights. The investors who had said, no one will sleep in a stranger's home, were now probably sleeping in Airbnbs, and probably crying about the opportunity they missed. But the story isn't all sunshine and air mattresses. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Travel stopped completely. Overnight, Airbnb's bookings dropped by 80%. The company that was worth $31 billion in 2017 was suddenly on the verge of collapse. Chesky had to make brutal decisions. They laid off 25% of their workforce, 1,900 people. They cut marketing budgets. They paused expansion plans. It was the worst moment in the company's history. Worse than being broke in 2007. Worse than the cereal days. Because now they had employees, investors, and millions of hosts depending on them. But then something unexpected happened. As lockdowns eased, people didn't want to go to hotels. They wanted private spaces. They wanted to rent entire homes away from crowds. They wanted to work remotely from cabins, beach houses, and mountain retreats. Airbnb's bookings came roaring back. By the end of 2020, they were doing better than before the pandemic. On the first day of trading, the stock price doubled. The company was valued at over $100 billion. Brian Chesky, Joe Jebbia, and Nathan Blecharczyk, the three guys who couldn't pay rent in 2007, were now billionaires. So what do we learn from this story? First, desperation breeds creativity. If Chesky and Jebbia could pay their rent, they never would have put air mattresses in their living room. If they had stable jobs, they never would have taken the risk. Sometimes your best ideas come from your worst situations. When you have no other options, you get creative. You try things that sound crazy. And sometimes, those crazy things work. Second, rejection doesn't mean you're wrong. Every investor said no. Every single one. They all said the same thing. No one will sleep in a stranger's home. They weren't wrong because they were stupid. They were wrong because they couldn't imagine a future that didn't exist yet. When you have an idea that's truly new, most people won't get it. They'll reject it. They'll tell you it won't work. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It might just mean you're early. Third, sometimes you have to do things that don't scale. Flying to New York to photograph every apartment? That's insane. That doesn't scale. You can't do that in every city in the world. But it worked. It proved the concept. It showed that good photos mattered. And once they proved it, they could hire photographers in other cities. In the early days, you can't always do things the right way. Sometimes you have to do the hard, manual, unscalable work to prove your idea works. Fourth, timing isn't everything, but it matters. Airbnb launched in 2008 right as the financial crisis hit. The worst possible time to start a travel company, but it was also the perfect time. People needed extra income. Renting out a spare room could help pay the mortgage. And travelers wanted cheaper alternatives to expensive hotels. Sometimes bad timing for the world is good timing for your idea. And fifth, the best revenge is success. Remember all those investors who said no? The ones who said, "This will never work"? They missed out on one of the biggest returns in venture capital history. Early investors in Airbnb made over 1,000 times their money. Sequoia Capital, one of the most prestigious VC firms, rejected Airbnb multiple times. They later invested in Airbnb's competitors, trying to catch up. It didn't work. The founders who got rejected? They're billionaires now. The investors who said no? They're still investors. But they're probably kicking themselves every time they see an Airbnb listing. Next time you can't pay rent, don't panic. Remember, 3 guys turned that exact problem into a $100 billion company. Of course, you'll need 3 air mattresses, a design conference, a willingness to let strangers sleep in your living room, and the ability to sell $40 cereal boxes. Or, just book an Airbnb and think about it. Either way, remember this. Every giant started as a seed. Even a seed that was just 3 air mattresses and a desperate idea to pay rent. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button. We're building a series called From Seed to Tree, stories of how the world's biggest brands started from nothing. Next time, we'll talk about a man who got so angry about a $40 late fee that he decided to destroy an entire industry. Spoiler, he succeeded. It's the Netflix story, and you won't want to miss it. See you in the next one.